Broadcasting live from somewhere in the Shadow Realm, this is YuGiOh Duel Links Talk. Here's your host, Doug Dimmadoo.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of YuGiOh Duel Links Talk. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different than just your typical deck overview. We're going to discuss general strategy within YuGiOh Duel Links, and this is going to correspond well with the most recent post on the YuGiOh Deck Talk blog. If you're not familiar with it, it's probably because you don't know about it because it just came out this past week. Well, the YuGiOh Deck Talk blog is YuGiOhDeckTalk.wordpress.com. Again, that's YuGiOhDeckTalk.wordpress.com. So we recently did a short article just about how to stay competitive in YuGiOh Duel Links with a free-to-play mentality. Now, what I mean free-to-play is, I don't mean that you're just playing the game without putting a single penny into the game, and I know that there's plenty of you who don't put any money into the game whatsoever, but there are a lot of individuals who, for the most part, they'll put in a few dollars here, a few dollars there, maybe if there's a certain set that they want, or if there's a certain sale that Konami's pushing in YuGiOh Duel Links. So, there's nothing wrong with that, but you see more so now that we're getting a lot of new box sets in, and just a ton, just a ton of opportunities for new cards, newer decks, newer builds, and not as many opportunities as far as free gems to keep up with all of these new packs. We really have to start thinking about, how to stay competitive as somebody who maybe will not be putting so much money into the game. Now, there are plenty of you who are going to take advantage of the sales, who are going to put the money in to get 3 copies of each Ultra Rare out of each box set, and more power to you, because that's the quickest way to get everything you need to start building the best decks. But for a lot of the other players who are on a budget, we're going to have a few pieces of advice that may be helpful, and it's all part of this little guide that's on the YuGiOhDeckTalk.wordpress.com website. But yeah, what I want to go through is just a few different strategies to keep yourself in the game and keep yourself competitive. So the first one that we have listed here is to unlock cards from legendary duelists. Now, I know that a lot of the legendary duelists have their own kind of archetypes, their own kind of themes. Say, for example, you have Rex Raptor with all of the Dino deck essentials. You have My Valentine when you start going up against her at level 40. You have all the Amazoness monsters that you could really start building decks out of. But the thing is, it takes a lot of grinding. So what I mean by grinding is you have such rare cards that really make the decks really well worth it. You could probably go through 1,500 to 2,000 gate keys for that specific legendary duelist, and maybe only get 1 copy of the card that you were looking for. So it does take a lot of time to keep on going up against these legendary duelists and trying to unlock the cards that you want for the decks. But once you have the pieces that you need, you can still build some really, really competitive decks. And of course, the one that I always harp back to, and the one that I always bring up, is the Gatekeepers deck. Now, right now, it's sitting down kind of a mid-level tier 2 deck right now, but it used to be a very, very good deck, very top-tier deck for a while back. But having cards like Gatekeeper, you're able to farm Ishizu, you're able to farm Odeon, and you're able to get the pieces that you need, and that doesn't involve actually putting in any money to purchase packs. So that's just one example, but the more common example that you'll see, especially for players who are free to play, but also are maybe just getting into the game and don't really have all the time and the resources put in, as somebody who's been in the game for a lot longer, who's been able to accumulate gems at a much higher rate, and that's to utilize some of the basic legendary duelist sets, one of which is what I mentioned, Rex Raptor. You get a lot of the major pieces that you would typically need to just get yourself a standard Dino deck, and a lot of the pieces are rare. So, you do have the twin-headed dragon, you do have the crawling dragon number 2, you got both of those. I'm probably butchered the names, but they're the 2 rare monsters that will go very well with the Dinosaur Kingdom field spell. That is the skill with Rex Raptor. So that already sets you up for a pretty nice standard standard dinosaur deck that, it may not be the most competitive thing in the world, but for a newer player, it gives you a theme deck that does have its own type of synergy with it. And there are a lot of other good cards too, as long as you're farming Rex Raptor, you're able to get a lot of that good stuff. So that's kind of the first thing. Just start farming Legendary Duelists, and aside from their own archetypes and aside from their own sets, there are just very, very good cards that could go in a lot of decks. One of which is Tea's, the Supremacy Berry. And that's the one that increases your life points by 2,000 life points if you have fewer life points than your opponent. And yeah, that's a really good spell card. It can be used in a ton of different decks, but it's something that you acquire from a Legendary Duelist and not something that you get out of a pack. So not every great card can be found in packs of cards. You have the Legendary Duelists at the gate that you're able to farm, but you also have Legendary Duelists who show up with events. So if you're a free-to-play player, you just try and take full advantage of all the events. Like when Super Joey comes in, you try and get, as difficult as it can be, try and get the cards from Super Joey, try and get the cards from Elegant Mai. Whoever's showing up in Duel World, you try and do your best to get some of the more rare and more sought-after cards, because at the end of the day, they're going to be highly, highly usable either in their own archetype or in a much broader sense. So that's kind of the first strategy for free-to-play players. The second one is to go for budget deck builds. Now, what I mean when I say budget deck builds, I mean cards that are in packs, but that are not as difficult to obtain, because you could build a really solid deck out of, say for example, if you're looking at one of the mini boxes, if you have 3 copies of this one super rare, you could build a really solid deck because you got to get 3 copies of it. But then you're talking about possibly 200 to 220 packs to get your 3 copies of that same card. Well, it seems like Konami's kind of going a different route now, where it seems like with a lot of the recent box sets, they're coming out with more budget-friendly cards in those decks where you're able to get multiple copies of what you need to build a really standard, solid deck. The first example that is in recent memory is the Naturia archetype that is in the most recent mini box set, and it pairs so well with Seto Kaiba's beatdown skill. But a lot of the cards that you need for that deck are either commons or rares. So you have a lot of what you need just based off of going through the box set only once. You don't have to go through it you don't have to waste a ton of gems and go through a ton of resources to get all the copies of what you need. So you're able to get the Naturia pumpkin. You're able to get the Naturia the flower, the bug. You got to get all those different pieces, but they're not the ultra rare in the box set, and they're not the super rare in the box set. Same thing with the most recent Electric Overload box set. You're able to get a lot of the ice barrier cards that are not super rares or ultra rares or whatever. Yeah, you have the one ice barrier monster that is a super rare, but you got a ton of other ice barrier monsters that were running around in that box set that are rares or commons, and even the spell card I think is only a rare or common as well, the one that allows you to destroy any card on your opponent's side of the field by showing 3 ice barrier monsters from your hand. So you're able to see that. You're able to get affordable decks, and that's what I mean when I say go for a budget deck. If you're going to be spending gems on packs, you're able to get some really good budget-friendly decks like those without having to go through a box set so many times and expending so many gems and resources just to put a deck together that possibly after a little while may not be as effective as maybe it was a few months ago. And that's just kind of half the battle. And that's just part of the fun of it too. But that is probably one of the better pieces of advice that I've seen kind of floating around. But going for budgets. And 3, if you this is the third main point here, is to if you have a lot of gems and you're ready to start spending and you want to start going into boxes, the best advice that I've seen floating around, and it's pretty good advice, is to focus on mini boxes rather than the full large size boxes. And it's really just from a numbers perspective. There are so many good cards that are in the larger box sets. Some of the best cards in the game you'll find in the large box sets, but there'll usually only be 1 copy of each of those really, really good cards as ultra rares in each of those giant box sets. Well, how many card packs are in one of those giant boxes? You have 200 packs. So if you do the math, that's 10,000 gems just to go through the entire box once. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go through the entire thing. The typical strategy for going through one of those big boxes is know what you really want out of that box, and once you get each of those things that you really wanted, go ahead and reset the box and try and do it that way. But the same rule can apply for what I'm about to recommend, and that's to go for the mini boxes. Now, the mini boxes don't have as many ultra rares, they don't have as many super rares, but what they do have is one copy of each ultra rare in these sets, and usually it's just 2 ultra rares, and also just one copy of each super rare. However, the mini boxes only contain 80 packs, so you're able to get one copy of each of the super rares and ultra rares from going through the mini box set 3 times over, and it would only take you probably somewhere between 180 to 220 at the most packs of cards. So for the same 10,000 some odd gems that it would take for you to go through one entire large box set, you could go through a mini box 3 times. So you're able to get a lot of the cards that you would need to build a really solid deck. And the example that I used in the article on the WordPress is just going through Age of Discovery. I know it's like the first mini box, it's one of the oldest ones, but you're able to get a lot of the key pieces that you can still use to build a solid Mako Tsunami deck with a lot of those water monsters. So having a box set like that where you're able to go through it 3 times for the same amount of gems as going through one of those giant boxes, you're able to set yourself up really, really nicely to still build just an all-around solid deck, but also having multiple copies of the cards that you need. Because in Duel Links, decks really thrive on having more than one copy of a specific card. Yeah, you may have that one mirror wall like I have, but in a 20-card deck at the minimum, I mean, it's a lot more difficult to pull that than knowing that I have 3 copies of that card sitting in the deck, and if it's one that I really want to see in my hand as often as possible, having multiple copies is excellent. And that's why having these mini boxes and going through them the multiple times is a much better strategy as far as spending your gems. Now, that's not to say that you're still going to be missing out on a lot of probably top tier cards from a lot of the larger box sets, but from an economical standpoint, in terms of deck building and in terms of trying to get competitive with building decks and building more consistent decks, it seems like right now the route is to go through the mini box sets, just because you know what you're going to get, and you know basically how much you're going to need to spend to get those. Because I mean, if you're trying to go through a large box set 3 times over, it could be anywhere from 400 to 600 packs, and that's just, I mean, I can't even imagine going through all that just to get the cards that you really want in multiple copies. So just in terms of that, I mean, you're talking, you could probably be spending 30,000 gems just to go through one of those large boxes that many times. And unless you're paying the money for those gems, most free-to-play players just don't have 30,000 gems lying around. It's not the most, it's not a very common situation. So the last piece of advice, and I've seen this floating around from a lot of top-tier Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links players, is to save your gems until you need them. So, and what I mean by saving your gems until you need them is get the cards that you need to build yourself a decent competitive deck, and from there, hang on to your gems. When you have something like the World Championship Series, where you know that it's going to be a major tournament and you know you want to put your all into it, you're going to have a lot of gems on reserve to go into the mini boxes and the large boxes to get exactly the cards that you need to put yourself over the edge and do the best with the deck that you've been building. Rather than as you're going along and every time you get gems, you buy another pack, so your gem balance is sitting there at 0. Well, then when it's time when you're saying, oh, geez, I really could have used another copy of Mishizu or something, but I don't have any time or the resources to go and get it because I've been spending all my gems. So that's just one example, and that's why it is really, really sound advice to save the gems until you need them. So, that's pretty much it for the 4 major things. Again, if you just want to get that little quick guide, the little quick overview, it's all on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck Talk WordPress. So again, it's just YuGiOhDeckTalk.wordpress.com. Again, we just launched it this week, so you'll be seeing some news updates and some other helpful tips for the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG and for Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links on there, hopefully in the near future. And if you guys like the stuff, just keep reading the stuff. Let me know if you like it or not, because if you don't, I don't need to continue doing it all. But if you guys do enjoy it, I'll keep writing stuff. I'll keep on posting things, as news breaks. So, because there's always something going on in Duel Links. But anyway, that's kind of it for today's episode. If you have your own opinions on being a free-to-play player or, kind of a partially free-to-play player, I'd like to hear your opinions. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck Talk. It's all one word, at Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck Talk. And I'd love to bring this topic up again if there's other strategies or other methods that you guys use to be a little bit more successful on a budget. But anyway, that's it for today's episode. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care.